Welcome back. Today we've got a deck profile for Vanquishers trading card game. This is a new game that's came out very recently. Just finished its Kickstarter, just delivered its product to its backers, and now they're working on, their sort of retail release version of things. I split a few boxes with a friend and was able to trade into basically a complete playset of the first set, and have been playing a bunch of this lately. I'm really happy with how this Sybre deck has turned out, and I just kind of wanted to show it off. There aren't a ton of dedicated deck profiles for this game online, and so I wanted to do something to change that a little bit. So I'll just kind of get right into it. In this game, you have a character that you play as, a leader, a commander, whatever kind of singular character type game you'd of your liking. But here we have Sybre. This is actually the original. There was like a sort of pre-release promo of her where she had kind of this nice chromed out armor. She looks really nice. I like this version better than the backside of the actual release, so I use this as my sort of front side version. But she has 23 health. She has 15 shields, so you have to diminish your opponent's shields before you can hit their health. So basically she's got like 38 life. She has 13 defense. When you attack, your targeting value has to be higher than their defense to hit them. And she has 7 shield recharge value, so you can pay energy to recharge her shields. Any character has this of varying different amounts. Gathering 7 of your shields back is pretty good. This here is your icon stating that this is her V-trigger ability. It costs her 6 energy to V-trigger, which is what will flip her to her backside. And these stats kind of here at the bottom, and this text here, it just kind of tells you what she has available when she's in her V-trigger mode. So all this text box here is basically blank in basic gameplay until you get her flipped over. But she's 23 and 15 is pretty good. 13 defense is great. She's an assassin class. And a unique thing about her is she can play any class. She is not locked to a specific color. So that opens up some really unique deck building options with her. But once we get her V-triggered, which is when things really pick up, we've got her V-trigger mode here. This is the back of the retail released version. This original promo had kind of more of a chromed out foil here. I'm a big fan of shatter foil. I know it's up in the air, whether or not people like it. I think it looks really cool. But her effect here, destroy 1 storage energy point from any enemy damaged by the Reaper Blades. So characters have a hero item, which is specific to them. You can have one of them in a deck. And, well, hero items are mostly unique. The ones specific to them are unique. She has Reaper Blades, which we'll get to in a minute. If you deal damage with that weapon, your opponent loses a storage energy. You use storage energy. Think of it like if you've ever played the Naruto trading card game, or like the Dragon Ball CCG by Bandai, not Super, but the older one that's basically the Naruto game, where you have like a turn counter. It's kind of like that. You get a total number of, you get 1 more basically energy every turn by discarding a card from your hand. You can build up that storage energy and you can spend from that, but it recharges to that full amount at the start of each of your turn. So her effect is basically you set your opponent back 1 total usable energy every time she deals damage with her weapon, which is pretty good. On this side, her defense goes up to 15 and her shield recharge goes up to 8, which is also pretty good. We play her in this particular deck as a dark class. This attaches to your hero. While it's attached, your hero takes, when your hero takes energy class damage, you take 2 times damage from light energy damage, and you resist 2 dark energy damage. This is cool. There's not any light energy yet, so she doesn't actually have like a weakness, but her resistance is good because the other dark class heroes are pretty good too. So having some resistance to the dark decks is pretty nice. So this kind of would just equip like so. I'll just sort of show you your weakness and resistance by having an energy class that lets you use some specific cards that you can only use by being that class. And then we of course have her weapons, the Reaper Blades. Now these start in your deck, and you have to draw them out, but once you get them, you can equip them. Unlike normal weapons, they don't have like an ammo cost, so they're free to attack with, but they take your sort of hero slot. This one though is pretty great, and is one of the big reasons I wanted to play here. It costs 6, which almost every hero unique weapon does, but it deals 5 kinetic damage and 2 shield damage. Once their shields are gone, it basically just does the 5 instead of 7, but while they have shields, it's 7 damage. Fully armored, its first effect, you add 1 shield damage for each melee weapon equipped. That's pretty great. I mean, this is a melee weapon, so that's already 1. She is almost exclusively melee weapons, as you can see from her art. She uses a lot of swords and stuff, so there's a lot of times you're going to be getting like 1, 2, 3 extra damage off of this card, and that's awesome. It's one of the reasons I really wanted to build her. It's a game that uses a lot of like guns and stuff, and she brought a knife to a sword, or a knife to a gunfight, and I thought that was really cool. Also though, when you attack with this card, after rolling a 5 or 6 on you have like it's called like an awakened dice, I think is what it's called, but you have 2, a red dice and a black dice. And on your red dice, if you roll a 5 or a 6, you ignore the enemy's armor. There are armor cards that resist damage and things like that, and this ignores that. Then, if you're V-triggered, or if you're awakened, you can use these green effects at the bottom. This one says, after rolling a 6, ignore the enemy's shield and deal direct damage to life points. So, you just cut right into their life. You don't even have to hit the shield. If they hit 0 life and still have some shield, they're dead anyway. So, this is really vicious. But then if you can also pair this up with her stealing 1 of their energy every time it hits, that's also pretty good. Now, I personally don't... So the hero slot, like I said, is a unique item. You have 3 weapon slots, a main gun, a second gun, and then a hero slot. There are a lot of decks that run their 1 hero item. I think it's really cool. It's a great slot. It doesn't cost ammo. It is active as long as you have it there. And it's a 3rd attack every turn. So I run some additional hero items as well, some more generic ones. I run this gun here. It's called Alteration. It is a 4-cost hero item. This one's not unique, so I can have 2 of it in the deck, or I can actually have up to 4, but I run 2. It has 6 targeting, so when you attack, you roll your dice, you get the additional 6, plus whatever your dice roll is, it has to beat their defense. I forgot to mention this has 7 for its targeting, which is pretty good. But this does 2 and 2. But once per turn, if you miss, you can shoot it again, which is awesome. So you get 2 chances to hit with this. And then the second option, abilities cannot stop you from targeting. Just great in case there's any stuff that's going to prevent you from making attacks. This isn't going to let you can't be stopped by that. And we have one more big generic hero item here. This is a 6-cost. It's called Azimuth. It has 3 targeting, which sounds a little low to begin with, but it says after targeting, add the number on the ability die to your targeting. Sorry, I said awakened die earlier. It's your ability die. So that's your red die. Whatever you roll on that dice, you're going to add to it. So there's sometimes this could have 9 targeting, plus whatever your roll is. That's pretty cool. When you or one of your allies miss with a weapon, add a targeting to this. That's pretty good. It's really cool with this. If you use this twice, or I guess not really cool with this. There are other guns. If you have 3 weapons out and you attack with those 2, go with this, then it has plus 2 to its targeting first, which is pretty good, especially since it starts so low. But if you're V-triggered, you can add a kinetic damage for each dice roll. You focus on that. Each dice roll that exceeds the enemy defense value. So anytime you roll dice that would hit, you add a kinetic damage to this. That's pretty great. It already does 2. It's going to do more and more and more. You've got your shield here. This gun is going to whittle shields down really, really fast. 7 damage while they still have shields is great, if not 8 or 9 or 10. I like this gun a lot. It's a little situational, so that's why I only run it at 1. But having 4 items to have in my hero slot to give me that third weapon, I'm a big fan of. Getting into some other unique items for the character here. Characters have abilities that are also unique. You can have 1 per deck. This one here is called Fatal Nightmare. It is a assassin-specific one for Sybre here. You can play this card face down. It's like a trap card in Yu-Gi-Oh! It flips face up when something happens. You can choose to stop the enemy from targeting and deal 2 damage. Add 2 more life damage if Reaper Blades are attached. So you play this face down, your opponent's going to like, I'm going to attack you with this gun. You're like, no, you're not. Also, you're going to take 4 damage. That's just a cool card. It gets you out of an attack that could be fatal and deals a little bit of damage on the crackback. She actually has 1 additional one, the Eternal Failings. This one here, you can play this card face up. It's a Rift card. These are like enchantments that kind of stay in play. Once per turn, add 1 life damage to any melee weapon until the end of turn. You can add 1 more life damage if your Reaper Blades are equipped. So basically, once per turn, you can make a weapon do 2 more damage directly to their life, ignoring shields and everything. It costs 3 storage energy per turn. So the way that this works, you pay 6, it stays in play, and every time you want to use this effect, you have to pay 3. Paying 3 storage energy is a lot, but using this as a fatal kill, especially because it's straight life damage, is pretty huge. If you can get that to trigger with the Reaper Blades that can ignore the shields and go straight for their life, that's a really, really powerful combo. So that's it for a kind of like unique item package here. I'll get into more of the generic part of the deck. We have 4 copies here of Carbon Dagger. Now, Carbon Dagger it just does 3 straight damage. It doesn't care about shields. It's just 3. Now, it still hits shields, but it doesn't like lose damage if they don't have shields. It takes 2 ammo to use to power it. This specific type of ammo is energy cartridges. Costs 3 to play. Has 1 basic targeting, but after targeting, you add the number on the ability die to your targeting. So whatever you roll gets added to this, plus whatever your roll is gets added to this as well. Then if you have 2 of these equipped, it adds 2 kinetic damage. So these deal 5 if you have a second copy of this attached. So we run 4 copies of that. If you can have 10 damage floating between 2 weapons, that's pretty good, especially if you can set some things up like this to make them do additional damage. You can see how that would power up pretty quickly. We have 2 copies of Lovin Collider. Now this one isn't strictly a attacking item, but it makes your weapons do an additional 2 shield damage. It gives you an additional 2 shield recharge and an additional targeting. So the nice thing here, Devouring Energy, resist 2 energy class damage. So if your opponent attacks you with their dark energy type items, or glacier energy, or solar energy, or tech energy, it resists 2 damage from that. Also, after dealing damage with a weapon, choose to target once more. Does not apply to your hero item. So you can't make your hero item attack a second time, but getting to do one of these for 5 and then getting to do it a second time is pretty huge. The really cool thing about this, though, is while you're V-triggered, you get 2 times the storage energy for each card that you exile. So, as I mentioned kind of at the beginning, at the beginning of your turn, you can discard a card from your hand to give yourself 1 more energy for the turn. Once you're V-triggered, you draw 2 cards a turn instead of 1, and you can discard 2 cards. With Lovin Collider active, each time you do that, you get 2 per card, so you could technically be ramping 4 a turn, and you can really accelerate into getting a lot more effects out. So that's pretty cool. Now it's called a critical art. They go in one of your weapon slots, so it does take one of your opportunities to attack, but the fact that it lets your weapon attack a second time means that you still have the same number of attacks, plus get some added benefit to it. This card is insane. We have 3 copies of Shatterstar. Now this is our first generic sword in the deck. This one has a base 6 targeting. It does 4 damage. Oh, I guess it doesn't add 4 targeting. I apologize. That card before added +1 additional regular damage. Anyway, 5 cost, takes 2 energy as well. 4 damage. You can remove 2 durability from each armor damaged by this weapon. Armor, of course, takes durability. It has like durability tokens on it. As the durability winds down to 0, the armor breaks and goes away. This also says if you roll a 4, 5, or 6, you can remove 4 durability from an enemy armor. So this can literally shatter an armor on like a single blow. This card's really, really good too. If you're V-triggered, when the enemy misses you with a melee weapon, deal half of the damage of this weapon to that enemy. As you can imagine, from other things that we've seen, there are little opportunities to sort of squeak in damage with this deck just for like existing, and that's one of the things I really like. So while you have this equipped, if your opponent misses you, which already sucks for them, they also are going to take 2 damage. Awesome. I love this card. Our final sword, we have 2 copies of. This card is called Tri-Blade. It's a 6 cost, so it's a little bit big, but 3 energy, also a lot of cost to really get it up and running. That said, it has 5 targeting, deals 4 damage. You can remove 2 defense if the enemy has a melee weapon equipped. So your opponent's defense just goes down by 2 if you're fighting another melee character. Add 1 kinetic damage for each of your attached vitalities. Not really relevant to us in this particular deck, but you can make it bigger. Also, if you're V-triggered, add 1 kinetic damage for each die roll that exceeds the enemy's defense value. So like I said before, anytime you roll something higher than their defense, you get to add a damage to this to make it bigger. Could be 5, 6, 7 damage. This is an awesome little beater. That's it for our weapon package. Getting into the modification slot, we only run one of these, but it's called Paradox Grip. We run 2 copies of it. This is essentially, you'd imagine it's like a handle you would put on a sword to upgrade the weapon itself. While attached, it can attach to a sword. It can attach to a sword, dagger, or axe. You remove 1 kinetic damage and add 3 targeting. So it makes the weapon do 1 less damage, which doesn't sound great, but making it have +3 targeting is crazy. Something that I really like to do is I like to put this on the Reaper Blades. The Reaper Blades is a sword, so I'll make the Reaper Blades do 2 and 4, but it adds 1, for each melee weapon, so it's already going to be a little more. And you can deal direct damage with it. This is going to make this have a targeting of 10. So if you look at her, she has 15 defense. This has 10 now by default. So on 2d6, I have to roll more than a 5. That's super easy to do, and hits very, very, very often. There are a lot of guys who have 13 defense and are even easier to hit. This combo is vicious. This is also good if you put this on one of your weapons you can attack twice with while you have the Lovin Collider out. Pretty powerful little combination there as well. We have 2 copies of Kinetic Grenade. Now this item is it's called an ability. There's like an ability zone you just play your cards into. Nice thing about this is it's just like an attack. You set it down for 3 and you do 4 damage to your opponent, 1 shield, 3 kinetic. And then it has, focus on that for me, roll a die. On a 4, 5, or 6, it does 1 more damage. So it could be 5 damage. Normally it's pay 3, do 4. Sometimes it's pay 3, do 5. It has a 2 splash damage effect here. This is for some multiplayer rules that they're still developing, but you can make it do 2 extra damage to additional opponents if that comes up. Then we get into our first actual dark item here. And this is really the reason you play Dark class. The Dark Grenade. Now this does 2 damage to shields, 3 kinetic damage, costs 3. So just by default, even if it had no effect, it's even just better than the regular grenade. We're basically running 6 grenades that all sort of do exactly the same thing. Pay 3, do some damage. This one, however, does some crazy stuff. So on a die roll, 4, 5, or 6 deals 1 extra damage, just like the other grenade does. But Proximity Mine, you can play this card face down. When you're targeted by an attack, you can flip it face up just to do 2 dark damage to your opponent. That's pretty cool. There's sometimes that can... just squeaking in 2 damage, element damage is great. But the V-trigger effect is where this card really, really shines. Any damage with this grenade curses the enemy until the end of their next turn. Now, Curse, the way that Curse works, if you are cursed and you use energy, you take a damage for each energy that you use. It's just huge. Like, you just get piled up so much. You lose so much. This deck taxes your opponent so much. It takes so many of their resources away from them. It punishes them for using what they do have. And it's really mean. We have 2 copies here of Energy Summon. Now this is just like a instant. You play this card face up, each player draws 3 cards. Now this doesn't sound super cool. Both players drawing 3 is less good than, you drawing cards and not your opponent. But a unique thing about this game, you can only have a maximum of 8 cards in your hand. If you would draw more than 8, if you would draw like a 9th card or a 10th card, you don't draw it and you have to take a damage for each card that you still needed to draw. And that damage is done to your life. So this card's really cool. It's like turn 1, you have your 7 card hand, you drew your card, your 8, you played a couple things out, you charged, you go into your next turn, you charge, you're down to like 6 cards in hand, you play this for 2, draw a couple cards, you take 1 damage yourself. Your opponent is very likely taking 2, 3 damage, and just squeaking this out later in the game too can be really impactful to your opponent. While they have, if things go right and you've whittled down their life enough, or their total energy enough, there's not a lot of things that they're going to be able to play. There's even sometimes you can, if you get things in the right order, you can get flipped over and start stealing your opponent's storage energy before they even have the chance to flip, and they don't even get to V-trigger all game. That hurts really, really bad. All their V-trigger effects don't work, their defense stays lower, their shield recharge stays lower. All of that's a huge detriment to being unflipped. So while that happens, you can start whittling down the energy that they have, and it becomes harder and harder for them to actually play cards. This then means that their hand is typically larger, and you can start dealing some extra damage just by making them draw cards that they can't actually draw. But we sometimes want to draw some cards for ourselves. We run 4 copies of Scouting, a 2-cost card. This ability is played face up. You look at your enemy's hand, which is good generally. It kind of lets you know when you're, like, what you need to prepare for, knowing if you have some time to set up an effect, if you know you're going to get something stolen from you, if you know you're going to take some damage off of something, have something discarded, whatever you can kind of set up your knowledge there. Hand knowledge of your opponent is only strong, but it's basically just pay 2, draw a card. There's not a lot of like inherent just card draw that exists in the game, so having this is nice. And as you've seen from a lot of these cards, costs are pretty high in this game, like in general. So getting some lower cost cards in the deck really helps you have early plays and lets you just be doing something with each of your turns instead of setting down an energy passing. In this game, it's pretty common to set a card down, pass, set a card down, pass, set a card down, pass, and then on your turn like 4, set down your first weapon and kind of start the game. I wanted to be able to do something with those first 3 turns there. So you'll see that I have some stuff included here that will let me do that. Speaking of that, I've got this card for 3 cost. Now this card deals 2 kinetic damage to your opponent. It adds 1 life damage if you have a sword equipped. So you can just make this do 3 damage. 1 of it at least is going directly to their life. If they have no shields, 3 of it will. But 3 costs to deal 3 damage is pretty cool. There aren't a ton of times where this is like just game-breakingly strong or anything, but there are little times where you can use this to ping some shields off and just hit them for straight life damage. Other times I wanted to know that I could hold one of these, get my opponent down to just enough that I'd be able to kill them off of an attack. And the worst feeling is when you get your opponent down to like 1 or 2 life and you have nothing left to do for turn, so you just have to pass and then they kill you on the crack. This at least gives you an out to that. I run 2 copies of Prime Energy. This card is insane. I think every deck should at least have 2 of this. I've seen plenty of them run 4, and that is fine too. I needed a little bit lower cost threshold in some of these things, so I ran 2. This card's played face up. Once per turn, you and all your allies draw an additional card. If you're playing multiplayer, anyone on your team draws an additional card, but really, you just draw 2 cards a turn with this instead of 1, or 3 cards a turn while you're V-triggered. That's another thing. You can keep your opponent from V-triggering and you're drawing 2-3 cards a turn and they're just drawing their 1 card. That hurts a lot. We have 2 copies of Enhanced Targeting here. Now this card costs 4. It's a support card, so it just sort of stays in play here. It adds 2 targeting and 1 kinetic damage to all of your equipped weapons. Now it discards after your next turn, so it doesn't permanently stay in play, but you're going to have this for basically 2 turns where your weapons are just going to be easier to hit with and do more damage on all of your guns. Or swords, any weapons, period. This card is awesome. It's unique to Assassin. I love this card. And you've got to, of course, have the little tech slot here. Regressive Glitch, neutral. Play this card face up. Choose any enemy's support or rift card and discard it. Sometimes there are cards like this that just sit in play that are frustrating. Having one of, if your opponent has one of these in play and is just drawing a ton of cards on you, that's brutal too. Another thing that you'll notice, these unique hero effects are also rifts most of the time. So this can discard those. There are some of them that are really, really good. There's a character called Saigon. He's the guy who's on like the front of the box here. His hero ability is really, really strong, and being able to get that off the board is really powerful. So I run a couple copies of this just to be able to give myself a little bit of an out to that if I need to. With the draw cards that we've included in the deck, I feel that we get enough of a card advantage to be able to see these when we need them at 2. But I could see pushing this to 3 if you were really concerned about something. And then to wrap the deck up, we just have 10 copies of the energy cartridge. It costs 1, provides 1 energy ammo. So you set it in play, you have one of those, your lovin collider. You pay 1, you equip it to this. Pay 1, equip it to this. Now you can actually use this card's effect. So that's something to consider when you're looking at these items. Like, this is a 4-cost card, but takes 2 energy. So really, it's going to cost you 6 to get it online to actually use. So that's something you really have to keep in mind when you're putting these decks together, that a weapon's cost isn't necessarily just what it costs to set on the table, because you still have to have enough energy or enough ammo, cartridges, or whatever to play it, and those cost energy to use. So I run 10 of this. We have a 49 card deck. In this game, you have a 45 to 70 card deck limit. I would like to get even closer to 45 than I have, but I'm really sold on all of the stuff included in the deck. That said, that's everything that's included here for Sybre and her deck. I think this deck is really, really cool. I love the idea of, being a sword-wielding character within a gun-based scenario. I think that's just really unique. There's a character called Clara who uses a bow, and I think that's also awesome. And I just think like things like that really spice up the characters are unique. Saigon, the guy I showed you on that box earlier, he doesn't really use guns either. He has like a powered gauntlet, and he's a conjurer class, and so he sort of like summons spells and stuff out of his gauntlet as opposed to using guns. There are like soldier class guys who just use guns, and that's like the majority of the weapons in the game are gun based. But I think it's just really cool, the different characters that don't have to use just strictly a gun.